This is Death or Prison, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. We bring you stories of hope and encouragement.
Hello and welcome to the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham, and to my left, Mr. Elmo Golden, and in front of us is our distinguished guest, Ender Pellerano. Welcome. We share a common type of rivalry with the Saints and the Buccaneers in NFL football, and we're going to get into that a little bit, your life in New Orleans, but we're also going to talk about Ender's 8.5 year prison sentence that you spent and how you got there. But I want to start off with the origins of New Orleans.
Okay. But before I get into that, I can't just let you slide with the Saints, because you are a Saints fan at heart. As soon as you said yes to Jesus, because the Bible's for the equipping of the saints to carry on the work of the ministry. Amen?
Yes,
Amen.
Yes.
So just from New Orleans, my mama migrated from Honduras. My dad migrated from Cuba. So they met in Mid-City, New Orleans. Then further down the line, they had my sister. Then they had me. And they was always working. My dad, he had a nightclub at one time. He was a DJ at one time. He was working offshore. He had he was selling cars. He was always doing something. He was a provider. He always provided for his family. And my mother, she started as a teller working in the bank and worked her way all the way up to a regional manager way later on down the line. But she was always at work. So while they were at work, I found myself on the streets, and it's just so important about the influences and the people that are around you. You can't expect school to raise your kids. You got to see who's involved, who's in their life, what type of influences there. And me, I gravitated to the wrong influences. Everybody that was coming up with me was into the streets, doing street things.
And how old were you when you started gravitating to this street life and you found yourself in the streets?
I just started as a young age with the hip hop culture, with the movies and the media, just looking at, what comes in a man is going to surely come out of him. And these are eye gates and ear gates. So I was listening to the wrong thing, and that started at a real young age, as far as I could remember. I always had a passion for music, but I was listening to the wrong type of music that was shaping and molding me. So even just as young as 8, 9, 10, I remember smoking weed. My uncles, they had a corner store where was by Bienville and Carrollton, right? And I used to like cold drinks like Coca-Cola, so that would be a treat for them to give me a cold drink. So when we came back, I had already finished my cold drink, and I was like, man, I want another cold drink. So they was like, okay, hit this joint and we'll bring you back. And I was like 7, maybe even younger, and I remember hitting that joint and they laughing, and then they brought me back. And I know my mother, when she heard about that, she kind of blamed them for the trigger in my life for going far. But everybody has to be accountable for their own actions, you dig? But
yes,
there are influences, you know what I'm saying? So that just went to 12 years old. I caught my first felony. I remember we were stealing jabos.
So now, from 7, introduced to drugs, up into 12, was it just like when you say you caught your first charge, were there other things that you did prior to that led up to that arrest? Or was it just the first time you tried something, you just got caught?
Oh, no. No, it was a lot of things going on prior to that. I remember stealing my dad's gun and him not knowing that I had it, and I would put it back where he had it by the time he get on. So I'm walking around with a gun on my hip. Everybody was older than me, so I felt like I had something to prove. I had to prove that I was worse than y'all, and I was the youngest. I remember just shooting guns and just doing everything contrary to the word of God, and just, stealing. But the stealing, we would come back and we would sell the clothes on the street, on the block. So getting a little bit of money, and then we was already smoking weed, being able to buy your own weed, and eventually we ended up getting caught.
You said something about doing things contrary to the word of God. Were your parents the churchgoers? Was faith a foundation in your household? Did you have that conscience just kind of on your own, knowing that it was wrong?
Well, my grandmother, my abuelita, she introduced me to the best drug, and that was she drugged me to church. You hear me? She drugged me to church. She lived, eat, sleep, bleed, breathe the Bible. Like my grandma, The War Room. You ever seen that movie?
Yes.
They owe my grandma royalties. You hear me?
Yeah.
She had a war room before the movie. I'm in the closet. We had pictures all over and pray. Like she would bring us to church. I remember my dad was even trying to come to church at a season in our life, but you know that was more religion. You know they were Catholic. You know my grandmother, but she was just she spoke in tongues. She really instilled in me that Jesus Christ was Lord. Like when we were sick, she would lay hands on me. You know, and I always strongly believe that mustard seed of faith that I had from that being instilled in me at a young age stopped those mountains from crushing me in life, as we'll get into further along. Yes. But yeah, you know, just back and forth.
I'm a little curious about your block, your hood.
Mm-hmm.
Was it dangerous? Did you have to defend yourself? How did that look?
So really, on my street, like I told you, I was the youngest one.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were the ones that I gravitated to was the ones putting in all the work. Like nobody else was really doing anything. So it was more of me just trying to prove myself to them rather than defending. Now, all of that came along further along once we got older.
Right.
But in that area, it was just really, really to be real, like just wanting to be down.
Right. It was like just a neighborhood.
Yeah, it was just a
neighborhood little gang.
Yeah. Well, dude, you know, they was doing, you know, they was robbing, they was jacking, there was the older guy, he was just coming home, he was selling guns, you know, so they was doing a lot, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like I said, it was mainly us. Like I didn't really have to do that. It was just because I wanted to be down with them.
Right. I understand that peer pressure is something that kind of push us away from even our wholesome training in our house.
Uh-huh.
Did your mother and your father ever identify with, hey, maybe this kid is running a little away from what we're teaching them?
You know, my dad is cool as a fan. He's like, he's not that bad for a boy, you know. It's kind of like,
gotcha.
like just, you know, because they're like a lot of like the men in my family, they're alpha males. You know what I'm saying? They're rough men, you know, and they seen certain influences, but they was always working, so they could tell me not to hang around with them, but as soon as they go to work, guess where I'm gonna be? Exactly where they told me not to be. You know.
Right. Go ahead, Johnny.
No, I was going to ask him. We stopped off at like a pivotal point when you were talking about your hood and your neighborhood, and then you said at 12, you had caught this charge. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
You know, Jabos was a thing in New Orleans. Like you had Jabos, you was on, you dig? So we started selling the Jabos.
What's Jabos?
That's a designer. That's jeans. They used to have the striped Jabot shirts. They had the Jabot jeans. We put the heavy starch on them. You know, so you really you wanted to have you some Jabos, but they was expensive. The Timbs, no. We down south. The Timbs is more New York. You know, we was Reeboks, Soldier Rees, and Air Force Ones. We call them G Nikes. Mm-hmm. So and the Jabos, you had to have some Jabos. So once we seen that, we was trying to capitalize on that by us being so young. We were able to steal the clothes and then sell them back on the neighborhood. So this one time we had so much clothes. I remember we even had they had like a card show going on in the middle of the mall. There was like a Michael Jordan rookie card that my friend had swiped.
Wow. Had
all kinds of other stuff, and then it was just this last. I was like, "Come on, call your mom to pick us up," because they had a party. We had a party to go to, and he's like, "All right." And I was like, "Look, we got enough stuff. Like, don't steal nothing else. Like, we need to get out of here." And then he stole 2 shirts without telling me. And as soon as we walking out, they grabbed us and jammed us up. So now we got caught. Now they called our parents and you know, that particular friend, he was a good friend of mine. He ended up overdosing later on down the line. But that whole group, like my friends that I grew up with, one of them got murdered, the other one got stabbed, shot in the head, set on fire, the other one overdosed on drugs, the other one got deported out of the country. So, like friends that I grew up with, I don't have them, But anyway, he ended up taking that charge, even at 12 years old. Now, we all got arrested. They called our parents, but when it came to going to juvenile court, he ended up telling the judge that I didn't know what he was doing.
Wow. Did that change like your mindset, your dynamic? Did you say, wait a second, I just did something and there were repercussions for it. I don't want to do that again. Was there any conversations by your parents saying, hey, don't do this, don't hang out with these people anymore?
Oh, yes, indeed. Really, my mom, or like I really felt bad for putting my mama through this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Having to bring me to court, having to watch having no control over situations like that. But the approval of man will kill you. The approval of man will kill you, because as I got that validation, we got arrested. Now we think we tough, right? And then just that respect and affirmations from the wrong people in my neighborhood being approved by them, it just made me even worse. So now I'm doing even more things. Like that led into me getting jumped in a gang at 14, 15 years old. First degree, they kicked my mama's door in possession of a stolen weapon when I was like 14 years old, and so it just always got worse. And getting arrested at the Mardi Gras with weed, but that was even God interjecting in that situation, because we were going to fight. We had a bandana with an 8-ball wrapped in it. A couple of dudes had knives. We was going to do something real reckless, and we got caught smoking weed in the car before we could get out and do what we was going to do. And I see that God's hand even in that, but I know I had a praying grandmother and a praying mother.
What gang you got jumped in the gang? How does that work?
Yeah, I was a Latin King, and that was the largest Latin street gang in the nation. So they had this guy, he brought it down from Chicago to New Orleans. They had a New Orleans chapter, a Kenner chapter, and a Metairie chapter. I got jumped in the New Orleans chapter, and I always touch on that, even when I'm speaking to the kid, really just when I'm speaking to anybody, because I let 5 grown men jump me to be in their gang. So I like to put it, I let 5 grown men jump me so I could be their friend. So what would I have to do to keep that friendship? That ended up leading to a 1st-degree attempted murder, 3 counts of aggravated assault, 1 count of aggravated criminal damage, gang-related. I was 16. I made 17, was charged as an adult. So I always tell people, and even just anybody, like, you just got to be yourself. God can't anoint the you pretend to be. The calling is on who God called you to be. So anytime you have to be something else, or you have to do anything contrary to the word, to be down or to be friends or to be admonished by people, like that's just a trick from the enemy that's going to take you down a real dark place.
Right. Just out of curiosity, because I've always wondered, why do guys get in the gang? And my through my just information, I always go back to, it's something that they're lacking in their family. Also, I understand you say validation to men, but was there anything lacking from your parents that kind of swayed you more to say, hey, I need to be in this family?
Well, it was just presence. Like I said, they were always working, so they wasn't really there. You know what I'm saying? So so the ones that were there was the ones doing the wrong things. So to be accepted by them thinking that this is my family because I get their time. I heard a guy say love is spelled Time. Time, the time you spend with people, right? Shows you the love that you have for those people. So it was because they weren't there. And then it was also, I always wanted to do something great. You know what I'm saying? I always wanted to do something great, and I felt like this was something great. Largest street gang in the nation. Remember, I told you about the music and the movies, right? So movies like Blood In, Blood Out, movies like American Me. Like I had aspired to be like this. So now this is my into a gang on this type of scale, thinking I'm going to be a part of something great, not knowing that there's nothing great aside from Christ. You know, so it was just a deception, a lie straight from the pits of hell, to be real.
Right. And the guys that we, all girls, guys and girls that were in the game, would you consider them, just to be blunt with it, would you die for them?
Now?
No, not now. I'm quite sure you would not.
Hold up.
While you were involved in the gang, I'm trying to see if it's close knit like that.
Well, you know, they got the points, even the points, one of the points stand for loyalty. One of the points in the crown stands for loyalty, love, honor, respect, obedience. So this was, and a lot of it, like the Constitution actually had biblical principles in it. But it's like the leaven, you know what I'm saying? Like just that little bit of lie ruins the whole bunch, you know? So, when I was in it, I always considered myself loyal. Like, we're going to die together. Like, I'm not going to run. Like, I was really loyal even to my fault, you know, but I understand hindsight now, that's the way God wired me, you know, but it was just because I was under that influence of deception because of the enemy. The enemy always wants to pimp you. So he wants to see, God wired us the way he wired us, right? So what the enemy wants to do is pimp you and use the gifts that God gave you for him, right? So when he uses it for him, now there's limitations to everything because the wages of sin is death. Amen. The ways that seem right to a man, but the ending is death. So I was always loyal. I always went hard, but I was loyal to the wrong thing and going hard for the wrong thing. And it was equating to a lot of death in my life.
Andrew, you mentioned you were jumped in
by 5 men.
By 5 men, and you were what, 14? You said at the time. Sir. Walk us through how that looks.
It looks insane. Okay, you got five men in a circle. You're in the middle. They dab you off, and then they start the time, and you just start fighting. But you know, you're fighting 5 men. But whenever they knock you down, they let you get back up. They don't stomp you out. Like in the heat of it, you might get stomped in, and they hold it, back up, get back up. And then they go at it some more. And I remember thinking like, man, are they giving me extra time? Like it felt like forever. You know, it was like 2 or 3 minutes, but it felt like forever. Like, and I was like, oh, y'all give me extra. And we just kept going and kept doing it. And then by the time that the time was over, then they dap me up, give me a hug, and now, like, you're in.
Now, in the movies, they got one guy coming at you at a time. You've seen the karate movies where you got one guy, they'll fight, and then the other guy come in. But in real life, it's literally 5 people simultaneously beating you down at the same time. Wow, at 14.
At 14.
We had an opportunity to meet your son. Now, imagine... I'm quite sure you got bruised up and you walked in your house. What did your dad say?
My dad wasn't home. It was my mom. And she was like, oh my God, what are you doing? What did you do? And I was like, because I had just got kicked out of Shaw High School, which was a Catholic high school, and I was going to a public school to John Eric. And I was like, I got in a fight after school, you know, I got to prove myself. I'm not going to let nobody mess over me. And she's just like, you could see her broken, like, just like, man, my son is really just going all the way up. Think about it. They kicked her door in, possession of a stolen weapon. Then I get kicked out of high school. Now I'm in other public high school. Now I'm coming home bruised up, you know, not knowing that I just joined the gang. Center. Yeah, in and out. And that led to house arrest. Before I caught the first-degree attempted murder, I caught a first-degree robbery. And I ended up going to Revard. Then I ended up getting out the detention center, coming out on house arrest. Now we're going to school on house arrest. The whole clique, 6 of us. And we're thinking that's cool.
Andrew, how many times were you arrested from 12 to 14? Or what was your last arrest?
So the first one I remember it was theft, stealing the clothes. Then it was possession of marijuana. Then it was possession of a stolen weapon. Then it was first degree robbery, and then that ultimately led to the first degree attempted murder, 3 counts aggravated assault, 1 count aggravated criminal damage, and it was gang related.
You mind sharing about that day?
Oh man, so I was actually one of the last ones to get caught. It was a number of us in the car, and I remember the day before I robbed a dude out of a gun. He said he was selling a gun. I said, "Let me see the gun," and he gave me the gun loaded. I cocked the gun back. I said, "This is my gun." What could he do, right? I asked him let me hit his weed, and then he gave me the gun. So we end up stealing all of that. So we pull off. So the next day, I'm selling weed. So I remember listening. I was listening to a song. I had the door wide open. I was waiting for some of my friends to pick me up. And I had stashed the gun the day before, just in case he called the cops or whatever. So all I had was on me was weed. And then detectives pull up. But I had the door wide open, listening to the radio, going back and forth. So when I went in the front to see where my friends was at, they snatched me. So when they snatched me, I started trying to tussle with them. They had plain clothes on. They didn't. There was detectives. So when I'm trying to tussle with them, they just hurry up and grab me and cuff me and threw me in the back of the car. So when they did that, I took what was on me and I shoved it in the seat. So then I'm thinking man, if they, I'm thinking they come and got me for the gun because the attempted murder happened almost 2 weeks prior. So I thought we got away with that. So then I was like, what do y'all have me for? I'm hoping it's the gun because I already stashed the gun. Oh, it's the weed. I got. They didn't find it on my person, so they was like, what we got you for? How does 1 count of first degree attempted murder, 3 counts of aggravated? So they read the listing till we sound. I'm like, oh man. So now I'm in there and I can't get out. And I'm 16, 17. I might have just made 17. I was 16 when the crime happened, but I had just turned 17 like a week, I told you it happened 2 weeks prior. So I just made 17. They charged me as an adult. They put me on the 3rd floor on the gang unit and they announced, hey, y'all got a Latin king in here, and throw me into jail. But then on that pod, there was a lot of Bloods, and Latin kings and Bloods kind of ride together. And the pod across the street, across the hall, they had Crips and folks and all of that. So I remember thinking I'm not about to let anybody play with me. So the first one, I'm just gonna try to make an example out of, and I got in a couple of fights.
No, I was going to say when they did that, I'm kind of curious, and I know people listening curious. Was that like them just throwing you to the sharks by announcing you were a Latin king, or was that like a badge of honor, or were they just putting you in harm's way on purpose?
No, harm's way on purpose. Actually, when I was in the holding tank and they did that, one of the guys that was in the house, the bullet went through one of the bullets he had a starter jacket on and went through the sleeve of his jacket. And I was actually in the holding tank with 2 guys that were in the house that we had shot up. And it was but they didn't do nothing, but I knew some dudes from around my way in there too, and then when they put me on the 3rd floor and did it, they was actually just trying to throw me to the wolves. All right, you think you bad? Okay, y'all got a Latin king in here. Oof, close the door. And I'm going to be all the way real. I was scared, you hear me? I was scared, but fear is going to push you to either fight or flight.
Right.
So I was scared, but I'm not about to let people play with me because I'm not about to have that, you know what I'm saying? So I'm going to have to do what I got to do. I was scared, though. I'm not going to sit here and rep and act like I wasn't. I was scared, and that fear said, whoever plays with me, I'm going to make an example. I was ready to die in there or do the rest of my time in there for whatever I had to do, but I was not about to let somebody play with me. You know what I'm talking about?
Right. So the original charge is attempted murder, but it was like a drive-by or something?
Yeah, no, we jumped out. But then the person ran into the house. So the person we were shooting at ran in the house, and they had 3 more people in the house. So that's how we got the aggravated assault on everybody that was in the house and attempt murder on the guy that was outside of the house.
I want to go back to Grandma because you mentioned that Grandma was in your life early on, drugged to church. I was drugged to church as well. At this pivotal point in your life, is she still in the picture, and is your faith somewhat there, or where are you at this point while you're in the county?
Grandma's always been in the picture. Well, she's deceased now, but she's in heaven, right? And anyway, I knew that only Jesus could get me out this situation because of the faith she instilled in me. And just like I was talking to somebody about this the other day, I've been in a lot of trouble. I've been in a lot of situations to where I should be on death. I shouldn't be here right now, right? But I always knew that my story wasn't gonna end like that. I just had a knowing, you know what I'm saying? And because God, ultimately He's the author and finisher of our faith, but I knew only Jesus could get me out that situation, right? And whenever the lights would go out, I would be at the end of the bars reading my Bible. I read the whole Bible from front to back, from Genesis all the way to Revelations, while I was in there fighting that charge. I knew enough to know only Jesus is going to be able to get me out of this. And I knew enough to know the power was in His word. And I read it from front to back, but I wasn't digesting it, right? I just knew I had to read it. I just know I had to read it, but I wasn't understanding it, but I knew I had to read it. It's that mustard seed of faith, right? And I would catch myself at the bars through the light on the hallway reading that Bible. And man, I'm talking about, we ended up getting a bond reduction after I was in there 4 months. So then I end up getting bonded out, right? So when I get bonded out,
Bond you out.
my dad, so he bonds me out after I got a bond reduction. After 4 months, I get the bond reduction. He bonds me out. So then I do my juvenile probation, and Ms. Williams, cool as a fan, I end up finishing my juvenile community service. And Ms. Williams said, "Look, finish all your community service. I'm gonna terminate you and hand you over to the adult system. That way, you don't have to back up juvenile time on top of your adult conviction, right?" Yeah. So then, I end up getting violated because I had a crown medallion, and I was still on the charge with the gang. So then they ended up revoking the bond, and I remember going somewhere, but then I had to go in because the house and all of that. So I turned myself back in, but it was just enough time for her to terminate me because I already finished the community service.
Ander, it's been a joy talking to you, and we actually have more. So this is just the first part of a very, very compelling story, testimony. And we're pausing right here where you're 17 and you're about to be sentenced as an adult. And that's where we're going to pick up on the next episode. This has been the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. To my left, Mr. Elmo Golden. And you've been listening to this riveting story of Ander Pellerano. This is the Death or Prison podcast, but we say choose life.
Teach one boy and girl. Maybe we can change the world.